Wicked problems. This has been a really interesting segment for us to do. And the whole concept of wicked problems is really a term used to describe some of the most challenging social issues of our time.
Wicked problems require a reframing of success. While never fully solved, success in wicked problems means making a difference toward or having an impact on improved outcomes and reduced risk.
Geez, we have some doozies of wicked problems in our society right now, don't we, Tony?
Yeah, and the list keeps getting longer and longer.
You know, it does. And it's kind of funny because I was talking with my mom the other day, and it was just, we were kind of talking about how there's all this stuff. And I said, I think part of it's just there's a lot more souls on the face of this planet. And that complicates things.
Well, we still don't know what the actual carrying capacity of the globe is.
Well, we seem to be testing it out. Which brings us to today's wicked problem, infrastructure.
Living green or sustainably is about more than saving on your electric bill and doing your part to protect natural resources. It is about a safer and healthier life for you and your family without sacrificing style, quality, or budget. This is a movement to provide all of us with clean air to breathe and water to drink, safe, healthy food to eat, and places to live, and energy to run the places where we live, learn, work, and play. Join your hosts, Marla Esser-Close, the Green Home Coach, and Tony Pratte of the Sound Room to learn how everyday green homes work for you, your family, and your community.
Hey, y'all. I'm Marla, the Green Home Coach, and recording live at Shock City Studios in downtown Soulard, better known as St. Louis, Missouri.
I was going to say, you got to tell them where Soulard is.
Soulard's a really old part of St. Louis, though. It's so fun to be down here.
It's the old French Quarter.
It is, isn't it? That's a good point. So the building that we are in, that is where Shock City Studios is. I want to give you guys a shout out. And Sam, our very favorite Sam, is sound engineering for us today on his soundboard that I couldn't remember the name to.
The unofficial, official third member of this party.
Yes, very much so. We realized today that we have been recording with Sam off and on for 6 years. Pretty amazing. Fun times, eh?
Very fun.
You haven't fired us yet.
But what's so cool about Soulard and much of St. Louis is that it is one of the older cities in the United States. And infrastructure is such a huge part of our cities, as well. I mean, it's part of our whole country. But there's layers in these older cities where you can see or, get bits and pieces of what infrastructure used to be like. And, like in Europe, you can still find Roman roads that are still functional in some parts. And all of this is different aspects of infrastructure. And how we move forward as a society and how our cities grow, how our connections grow, how our transportation grows, how we move water, people, things, all of this requires infrastructure.
And you make a great point because this is not a simple one-size-fits-all issue either. Because for newer cities that haven't been around that long or, have been built up overnight, it seems, they don't have the major problem as some of the more legacy cities in the eastern part of the country. St. Louis is a great example. We keep talking about St. Louis because, we're from here.
Yes, but it also has some very interesting qualities because of the fact of where it is in the United States geographically, where it is in the topographical part of the United States, and how there's just a lot of different things that come into play here in St. Louis.
It's a good test.
It is a good test because of the fact, and it not only is a part of multiple aspects of like different meteorological, different weather patterns, different cultural patterns. It also literally is where East meets West in the United States, and it still holds that heritage.
Well, and think about this. So the infrastructure of St. Louis was founded in 1764. So St. Louis is older than the United States.
He's a walking history book, y'all.
I am.
Just saying.
It was here before the state of Missouri, before, United States of America, all of that. Well, our infrastructure, parts of it date back to that.
True.
And a lot of it, we don't even know where it is. I remember working on a project in the Central West End, which is part of the city, probably about 5-6 years ago. And they were digging a new foundation for a high rise. And they had to stop when they realized the hole that they dug, there was some 100-plus-year-old water sewer line.
Was that the River de Pere?
No. It wasn't River de Pere. But nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew. It was not on any map. Predated everything. It was from 1800s. They had to stop everything just to make sure they weren't going to do any damage. You just don't know what you're going to deal with. But that's older cities.
Yeah. The other thing about infrastructure I just want to bring up before we dive in is that, of course, there is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that's on the table right now. And there's been a lot of conversation around what infrastructure actually entails. And there's been a lot of interpretations that infrastructure is not only the hard cost infrastructure things like roads and buildings and bridges and conduits and all of the things that it takes for us to physically connect the electric grid. That'd be a big one. But there's also been some interpretations that our infrastructure includes more the services side that enables these things to work. And that's being under a great amount of debate. And since we only have a short amount of time for this podcast today, I'm going to suggest that we stick more to the physical aspects of infrastructure. There's enough there to talk way more than half an hour anyway. But I think just to frame this conversation, let's think of that. And the built environment and the infrastructure needed to run our country are very tightly linked. And we cannot build, even just to live in a house. Think of the infrastructure required.
Oh, it's immense. You have sewer systems, stormwater systems. You have the electrical grid. You have cable, internet that needs to come in, gas. You have the roads, water, fire. So you need the fire hydrants and all that. What else?
So if you go out to a place that's being developed, and this is, I'm sure a lot of us, people not in the building industry, unlike us, that drive past these developments, you see all these big machines, you see things happening, but you may not really connect the dots about what's really happening. So in just a subdivision, this is just a small little microcosm of our cities and our states and our country. Just to build a house, multiple things have to happen under the ground before that lot is even put up as available for a home to be built on.
Yeah, we've all driven by. We see the mounds of dirt, and we all see those big concrete rolls.
So that's your sewer drains.
Those are your sewer drains. That is basically all the infrastructure that needs to carry the wastewater.
And that's usually one of the first things that goes in.
Mm-hmm.
So all this stuff goes underground. Our sewer, our water supply, gas lines.
Electric lines, utility lines.
Electric lines may go. Most of them are going underground now.
All the new ones are.
But we still have a lot of electric infrastructure above ground, which in Oklahoma with wind, ice, and tornadoes is really fun.
Oh, we deal with it here too.
Trees here. But all of this infrastructure that happens just for that home has to be attached to the larger infrastructure where some company or organization is providing that service to be connected to.
And that part, that local company part, that regional company part, especially if we're getting into the whole energy side, is tied into the national side. Most people don't realize this. There's 3 electric grids in the United States. There's west of the Rockies, there's east of the Rockies, and there's Texas.
Yeah. Yes, as evidenced in the Great Freeze last year.
Yeah. So really, you can't easily, when Texas was having their issues, you can't easily transfer power from Missouri to Texas.
No, it doesn't work very well like that. I mean, there's just literally not a crossover. And I'm part of the can't remember if they call it Southeast or Southwest Power Pool, SPP. And it was really interesting to hear about all of the trade-offs and how they were pulling electricity generation as things were tanking out, they were pulling from other sources. And there's this huge management that goes on in these power pools that we have no idea. And this is part of why our infrastructure is very complicated, because as we've gotten bigger and there's been more inputs and outputs, it's taken more to really get it to even function.
Well, and this is why we have to worry about baselines. We have to understand what peak loads are. I know these are scary terms in reality, but we also, when we talk about energy and these transitions, we have to make sure it's a gradual transition so we're not losing any of our potential generation.
So the electric grid is only a small part of our infrastructure.
Oh, it's only like one of, 10?
Yeah. So a lot of what is also been very much in conversation lately has been our physical infrastructure, our roads, our bridges. The bridges in this country have been a big topic of conversation, and how we move water, which we've done some other podcasts talking about water, so you can also tune in. And there's been a lot of conversation also about how we keep allocating money to build new, yet not necessarily taking care of the maintenance of what we've already built.
This is a big issue because
it's huge.
It's great. We widen the highways and all this, but what about the bridges over the river?
Right.
Yes, we've seen in our area, some multiple ones being built new, and they shut down usually the old one too, and they refurbish it, which is great. But who hasn't seen a story in the news over the last 4 or 5 years of a bridge collapse?
Yeah, which is...
They say there are hundreds of bridges throughout the country that are in need of repair. And we're not talking some little 2-lane bridge over a creek. We're talking massive bridges over big rivers that handle lots of traffic.
Want to find and sell the value of green homes and features in your clients' projects and homes? I'm Marla Close, the Green Home Coach, and I have built What Makes a Green Home Green audio program just for you. This program offers an easy-to-understand language, audio trainings that are easy to consume on the go, with resource guides to help you absorb the information and reference it easily in your day-to-day activity. Your investment in this green home knowledge could unlock thousands of dollars more in business for your home projects. Check out What Makes a Green Home Green and how it will help you find and sell the value of green homes and features in your clients' projects and homes. greenhomecoach.com/homepro.
So how has our infrastructure gotten to this point, you think? How have we gotten to a point where so much is in disrepair?
I would say part of it is, once again, we hate to keep beating this dead horse, but it's our political leaders. It's not sexy to repair a road. It's sexy to say you have a new construction project in your district. It's sad but true.
No, I totally get it. There's a project in Oklahoma City that's now on its 4th round that has really helped to revitalize Oklahoma City. It's called the MAPS projects. And we just passed MAPS 4 a year or 2 ago. And one of the big conversations that came up when it went to vote was, were we voting in enough money to maintain what was being proposed to be built with the MAPS projects funding? And that's exactly what you're talking about. We want to build all this stuff, but we got to have the budget to take care of it. And one of the potential, pits to fall into is that. And you get into this whole conversation about how budgets work and how capital budgets work versus operating budgets. And again, you can do capital fundraising campaigns, but not operating expense campaigns. So how we fund these projects is part of the challenge. And fiscal matters are not where I am my strong point. So I'm not going to go down that alley.
Well, companies, just like, municipalities, they also talk about CapEx, capital investments, capital expenditures, all about growing the company. You never see them talking about operation budgets.
No.
Those are things that they look to cut as much as possible.
Which is backwards.
I know, but if you're talking about a private organization, that's profit in their minds.
So I'm going to jump out here on a log and postulate that much of this issue is caused literally by capitalism.
I don't know if capitalism is the right word, But where it is publicly traded companies and the stock market.
Which is capitalism, right?
Yes and no.
It's part of capitalism.
It's part of it.
You're much more of the economics person than I am.
I'm telling you, the biggest part of it is the stock prices.
Which we are continuing down this realm of wicked problems into some of these other issues too, folks.
That's because they're all tied together.
They are all tied together. Yeah, I'm so true. So we, at some time in my lifetime, I felt like switched to money being the key driver of almost all publicly traded companies. And they became beholden to the stockholders. In many cases, it appeared only to the stockholders and not so much to their consumers, their clients, their customers, their employees. And that alone feels like that's part of this whole issue. And I know we're going to explore that in some other podcasts as well. But I think what's crazy is I hadn't really considered before the strong tie between how we allocate projects and money and the sexy part of it to how much it just influences our day-to-day life, like driving over a pothole, or should I say diving into a pothole.
And how does that pothole get fixed? Enough people call the municipality and complain to where the politician feels threatened that he is going to be either voted out or he's not going to be able to raise money, so he fixes it or she fixes it.
But sometimes the people responsible for fixing that are not, they may be in an agency that's somewhat removed from politics.
True, but there is still somebody.
But their budgets are determined by
the politicians.
You
got it.
So there we go. So go show up to your municipal meetings and let your voice be heard, is what I heard. Matter of fact, there's a whole series of town halls in Oklahoma City right now that I want to get to one in July or August. This is summer of 2022, so put that in context if that helps. But I was enheartened that there were open forums for citizens to go hear the plans, to hear how the money is to be spent, and to maybe have an opportunity to voice an opinion.
Well, to be honest, there should be.
Absolutely.
Because it's not the government's money, it's our money.
Okay, this is a huge, I think, part of the problem is that we have a very strong we versus us mentality in this country. And the divisiveness has gotten stronger. And we now look at our government as a separate entity from ourselves. And we act like the people running our government are our leaders, but they're really our representatives.
What's the old phrase? Of the people, by the people, for the people.
And I do feel like I'm getting patriotic here, but that's a real challenge right now. And as hard as it is to say this is our responsibility. And we've kind of helped create this problem. That hurts.
Well,
ouch.
And part of it is, well, we all have busy lives. We elect these people to represent us, and then we don't pay attention to what they're doing.
We trust, but we don't verify.
Exactly. It's a good way to put it. And who does? The interest groups. So of the people, by the people, for the people has been replaced by of the interest group, by the interest group, and for the interest group.
So how do we break out of that? And most importantly, because we're talking about infrastructure, and most of us drive, bicycle, walk. I mean, we use infrastructure every single day and we don't think about it. So how do we tie that responsibility and asking our representatives to be accountable, how do we tie that to our personal experience?
You know, it really just comes down to if something is bothering you, potholes in the roads, water quality, sewer systems that aren't functioning well, it comes down to you haranguing that politician daily.
And haranguing, folks, doesn't mean being nasty.
No, it just means
being persistent.
Being persistent. Hey, are you going to fix this?
Politely persistent.
You don't have to yell and scream. You just have to tell that person, I'm not happy. I'm not going to vote for you.
So one thing I am noticing, the more I've spoken up, so many times I have literally been thanked for just saying something because so few people do.
It's because they're either afraid to, and in today's climate, I can get that, right, or they just don't know how.
This is true. And this ties so much into so many other wicked problems going on, like how to just respect each other and how to expect people to do what we ask of them but we got to ask. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people have just kind of given up on asking. So let's rewind here. So our infrastructure in many parts of this country is just not there.
It's crumbling.
I was trying to be nice. But how do we move forward into our future, which is what sustainability really means, is being able to move into the future? How do we get back on track? I mean, the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, is attempting to move forward in that.
Yes and no.
But it's also huge proposals, which is hard for us to relate to.
Well, I don't think anybody can trust the government with these large proposals because they're thousands of pages long and nobody's reading them.
And bite sizes would be
you want trust,
much more tenable.
Write me a 5-page bill.
Yeah. That's kind of, and that's another side note.
That's a whole new series.
That is a whole new series. So municipalities control much of our infrastructure on a day-to-day basis. Companies and organizations control much of the infrastructure on a larger regional, national basis, and both need to be addressed. And they both need to be able to connect. So, for instance, if you want to run streaming service in your house, you have to have the local infrastructure to attach your house to the streaming service, but you also have to have the national or regional infrastructure to bring that streaming service from wherever it originated, send it through the magic network, and get it to that municipality to deliver to that house. So both matter.
Well, and that comes down to public-private partnerships.
We've seen a lot of positives with some of these partnerships.
And actually, municipalities having a master plan.
Master plan. I like that idea.
That's really where it comes down to. And I'm not talking like in St. Louis, there's 93 municipalities in St. Louis County.
I thought it was down to 87 now.
Who knows? Another day, another municipality pops up.
That is a running joke in St. Louis, folks.
I'm not saying there needs to be 93 master plans. I'm saying the county executive, that is their office, needs to have the regional master plan in cooperation with St. Louis City, since that is two separate entities. And then to take it further, you get with St. Charles City and the St. Charles County executive, and they come up with their master plan in concert with St. Louis County, Franklin County, Jefferson County, on and on and on. That's how it works.
And what would be included in this master plan?
Well, that's you talk about your developments. You talk about, hey, we need to update the utility grids. We need to get internet here. There's a lot of new subdivisions going up that don't have internet access.
Yikes.
Exactly. Why? Because, well, they got to get it to them. They got to find a way to get the infrastructure there. So it's sitting there going, okay, who's going to handle this? What do I have to bring in a private developer to handle this? Is this a state issue? Is this a county issue? Is this a city issue? What is it? But until you identify this through a master plan, you're just not going to know. You're not going to go anywhere.
So if there's not a master plan in place, how is this getting done today? Because developments are being built, buildings are being built.
It gets done very slowly. I have many subdivisions that have been active for 6 months. They don't have internet.
Because they can't get services out there.
Services aren't there yet.
Everybody thought to check before they developed.
Well, no, they will. They'll check. And a lot of times, this is the answer they'll get. How many people are building it out there? I'm sorry. We don't service communities that small.
Which is exactly why you see a lot of newer communities starting off with dish or satellites because they don't yet have
Starlink. Starlink's starting to show up.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's a good point. And you'll see a lot of times when on the edges of developing areas that newer homes may be on their own septic systems and their own wells, propane tanks, because city services haven't extended out that far. So what you're proposing and what you're saying is if we flip the switch and we had a master plan first, that development would not happen until those services were in place or scheduled to be in place.
Well, you need an understanding of who's doing it. Because we don't know where the land's going to come from, because we'll take St. Charles County first.
Okay, that just sounded wrong. The land's going to come from the land.
Listen.
I know.
We know there's all these farms that are being sold for development. We don't know who's going to sell. We don't know where it's going to sell because Somebody's going to get offered the right price and they're going to say, yeah, I'm going to sell, and that's going to be a subdivision. However, if we know in this municipality, if you want to build a subdivision, you, Mr. Internet provider who has pretty much a monopoly out here, you're going to go in here. You're going to go to whatever subdivision is built. No questions asked.
There's an agreement up front.
There's an agreement up front. And if, oh, I'm sorry, I'm having problems with you. Okay, great. I'm going to get the governor involved. We're going to have a statewide one. And now all of a sudden the governor's going, oh, yeah, you know that tax break you want? You know what I want?
Right. So now the haranguing begins.
Exactly.
So we have two issues that are very prominent in this whole infrastructure conversation. One is, actually there's three, I guess. Usually comes in threes, doesn't it? One is fixing what we already have.
Mm-hmm.
Two is what we build new to build it better, more durable, longer lasting, so it'll serve us better. Us, the people who elect our representatives, need to let it.
People who actually pay for it.
Yeah, we do pay for it, folks. And then third is we need to think into the future about what kind of additional infrastructure, connections, et cetera, need to be in place for us to grow physically, as well as with our services that support that physical.
Well, and that's where you get into the whole debate, and which I'm sure will be a whole nother podcast, smart infrastructure.
Yeah, there's some cool things going on with that. And there's also a lot of conversation around how we use infrastructure wisely as a combination of how we use our resources. So those really tie in together. And infrastructure can also be done in ways that is more supportive of a community and not as supportive of a community. So it's important, both aspects. And I know in Oklahoma City, we've really seen this because there's been a lot of new stuff being built and then a lot of conversation about, okay, but we got to have enough money to take care of it.
That's the other part of the equation that nobody wants to talk about.
Right, because that's not the sexy part.
That's not the sexy part. Maintenance is not getting anybody elected.
No, and maintenance has always been a big part of our conversations because it's such a key part of keeping anything you build better.
True.
And our built environment for infrastructure is no different.
If it doesn't continue to work, it's not worth it.
So these bigger issues are hard for us to know how to get involved in. So I almost feel like being involved at a local level is so much more doable for many of us. Show up to a city planning meeting. I know like in Oklahoma City, we've got a whole series of open houses coming up about our plan. And I think it's important that people show up to these. And I'm going to do my darndest to show up because I haven't before.
I got a better idea.
Okay.
Run for local office.
Yeah, that's scary, though. I mean,
you know what? You don't need everybody to do it.
No, we don't. And it's funny because a friend of mine in Oklahoma City wants to get involved and run for office. And you go, girl, I'm going to do everything I can to support you in that because she's the kind of person I would want representing me.
I know. I have a friend that's doing it right now. Local rep, whatever. He's all excited about it. I'm excited for him. I can't vote for him. He lives in a different municipality, but.
So I heard a piece of advice that kind of goes down that line of thinking that school boards have become increasingly powerful. And this is kind of the first rung on the ladder for getting involved in governance is at a school board. So perhaps that's a suggestion.
School boards, even alder people.
Yeah. I think a lot of us think that we're too busy to take the time to show up for these things. And I hope that we will all reconsider. Because it is our communities that are being affected and our futures that are being affected.
Well, and I think because of the internet, because the news cycle's 24/7 now, because you can go find content if you're looking for specific content, you're not just relying on what the legacy media gives you. More and more people, especially over the last 2 years with the lockdowns and COVID and having a lot more time on our hands, are having eyes opened up. And I think that's what's causing more and more people to get involved, which on the flip side is terrifying more and more politicians.
Okay. And I take that. That's an interesting way to look at it. But that makes sense. I mean, there's a Senate seat open in Oklahoma, and I think there's 10 people running just in the primary to replace the seat. So, yes.
I think it's great.
There's a lot of people stepping up, which is good. The more people that get involved, it's a chance to change. And that's Yeah. If we're going to gripe, then we got to remember that we have a chance to do something.
I think the more people that get involved, the harder it becomes for the interest groups or that traditional mainstream political party that wants to pick their candidate. It becomes harder for them to do that.
Interesting. So this whole idea of infrastructure has a lot of tentacles to it, a lot of far-reaching consequences, intended and unintended. And there's a lot of conversation around communities right now, and infrastructure and communities really do go hand in hand. So pay attention and learn a little bit more about what's going on in your community and how you can contribute. And I love the idea that you gave, Tony, of getting involved. You just go be heard. And again, we can all be respectful and hear all kinds of opinions. And as we always say, put the problem in front of us, not between us. So I will go out on that note. What's yours?
I will say this. If you are going to these meetings, if you are going to raise your voice, be prepared to be yelled at, be prepared to be insulted, be prepared to be degraded.
That really encourages us to.
However, I know, but be mindful of that and be above it.
Yeah.
Go in with grace and dignity and don't get drawn into the game.
Grace is a good word. It's a good one to remember. It's a good one to enact. So there you go. We'll have a great Grace Green Day today. If you can say it, you can do it.
That wraps this episode of the Everyday Green Home Podcast. Get the show notes with all the resources mentioned in this episode. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Want more? Join the Love Your Everyday Green Home private Facebook group for more resources and behind-the-scenes insights. And remember that living a little better and greener is easier than you think.